The name's Bond. James Bond. Don't worry, I won't be doing that voice for the entire video. My name is Brandon, aka the BrandoCritic, and welcome to my 007 James Bond tier list, looking at the Sean Connery era of James Bond films. So we'll be looking at Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever. I will be doing one video alone for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And luckily for you guys, some of my tier lists in the past have not been the most diverse in terms of where I place movies, but in this tier list, at least every single category gets a movie. So let's get started. Okay, so this is our tier list right here, and I apologize for any specks of green that will show up on the screen. For some reason, my screen capturing recording system will just, have random flashes of green sometimes, and there's really no way around that, and they'll just show up when they upload it on YouTube. They won't actually show into the editing software, so I apologize for that. But let's start with Dr. No from 1962, and if my computer will work, my mouse always decides to fuck up during these situations. Like right now, let's move Dr. No over to Like It. There we go. So, I like Dr. No. However, for a recommendation, I can only really recommend this movie to James Bond fans. And if you are a James Bond fan, then you probably have seen Dr. No. And what do I mean by that? For someone who, likes the Daniel Craig movies or, hasn't really gone back to watch some older movies from the 60s, especially like action spy movies, this film is extremely dated. Like the acting, the editing, the effects, the action, the music. Oh my God, the spider scene. It's hilarious. So it is really, really dated. So for someone who isn't really a big James Bond fan, I'm sure that could be very distracting for them. But you know what? Even going back now, it's still so much fun to see where it all began. And Sean Connery, this is probably his best performance. At least the first three, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger, are his best performances. And you just see how, 007, James Bond, is like the epitome of the male fantasy, right? All men want to be him. I'm quoting Austin Powers here, spoof of James Bond, right? James Bond is someone that all men strive to be and all women want to be with, right? Not only is he dashingly handsome. I can't even speak today, guys. This is, we're going off the rails already. We're only on the first film. We're already going off the rails, but he is, super, super handsome, right? He's super suave. He can talk his way out of anything. He's a badass. He is capable, right? He can fly planes. He can play poker. He can do everything. He has a license to kill. He has an amazing car. Just Sean Connery embodies that perfectly. I love Daniel Craig, but I also love Sean Connery. He is so great. And in this movie, it's wonderful to see Sean Connery in this movie. He alone elevates this movie because, you know what? The climax, with Dr. No and everything, it's just very it's dated. It's very, very dated. And, when Ursula Andress or Honey Rider and James Bond are kind of trying to hide away from the dogs in that movie, the music is just so cheesy. It's a dated movie, but I do enjoy watching it because of Sean Connery. This is where 007 all began. So next up, we have From Russia with Love, and I'm going to put that one in Really Like It because really, this movie improves on everything from the last movie. It improves upon the story. It was more spy espionage rather than, some guy just trying to take over the world. And the villains were more prevalent, right? Colonel Klebb and Grant. That's a good dynamic. You have the criminal mastermind, playing both sides of the Russians and the Americans, or the British, I should say. And then you have Grant. He's kind of the equal to James Bond. He can outwit him in brain, and he can outmuscle him in, fist-to-fist combat. So again, great villains. And the story I thought was a lot more engaging than the last movie. And we have the Bond girl, Tatiana Romanova. Again, she is just absolutely gorgeous. Probably one of my favorite James Bond girls, just in terms of, she actually plays a vital role in the story. She's just a hot piece of ass for James Bond to screw. And again, if you guys have problems with, toxic masculinity, then the early James Bond movies are not for you, right? Because there's a lot of, James Bond will just sleep with every single woman he comes in encounter with or comes in contact with, just except for Moneypenny. And besides, Moneypenny in all these movies, in every movie, she's great, right? But just the banter that she has with James Bond, it's wonderful. And of course, in From Russia with Love, he signs the photo. Regardless, the Bond girl in this movie is actually prevalent to the story. And then the action scenes, the action actually started to push the bar. You have like that helicopter chase at the end, and you have the boat chase, and great stuff. No, especially by today's standards, but it was interesting. It was entertaining to see because we were engaged into the story. And still you have some cheesy moments. All the Sean Connery movies do have them, but this is where the Bond formula really started to take form. And in my mind, when they made this movie, they're like, okay, if we can have this as the bar, if all the movies can be as good as From Russia with Love, then James Bond can really take off as a franchise. And then we got Goldfinger. And most people believe to this day that it is the definitive James Bond movie, and that's why I'm putting it into Love It. And even today, when I watch it, I still love this movie. Because this movie really perfected the Bond formula, right? You got the opening scene, then you got the opening title sequence, and Goldfinger is just a great, classic song. It's so just classy, and it's so elegant, and so unique. And, it gets us anticipating the rest of the movie. And, you see the different, faces of all the characters on all the bodies. And it's like, okay, we understand what this movie is going to be about. It gives us a feel for the rest of the adventure we're going to embark on. And you know what? Like, this is the most engaged I've been in all of the Sean Connery Bond movies. Because after the title sequence, we're introduced to the villain and their big plan. Or we at least know that, okay, this is the villain. We don't really know what they're up to, but there's something you should know about. And then, of course, we learn, James Bond is briefed. He goes to Q, gets his gadgets. In this one, he gets his car. And then he goes to travel the world, meets women, fights bad guys. The works, right? This movie perfected the formula. And because of that, this becomes the definitive 007 movie, right? The story got bigger, the production value got better, and the action scenes just felt grander, right? This climax, it does a great job. This movie does a great job leading up to the climax and going, the anticipation just keeps going up and up and up and up. And then when the final battle takes place, even for 1964, we are invested and we are totally along for the ride and we're rooting for James Bond. And the action for 1964, it's really, really well done. I still love this movie today. So how do you top that? Well, some will argue that they never have. The Bond franchise has never been able to live up to Goldfinger. And with Thunderball, I'm going to put it in It's Okay. I call this the underwater James Bond movie because, again, this movie mostly takes place underwater. There's a lot of underwater scenes with, the big baddie's plans, right? And this movie, you start to see like the villain's plans start to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they really push the envelope. You have Goldfinger, wanting to break into Fort Knox, and that was really great. But then we have, stealing nukes underwater. And while the underwater scenes at first, they're like, oh, this is actually quite interesting. But it does not keep your attention for very long because it just gets kind of boring, right? And maybe that's just me. I know a lot of people do love the underwater sequences in this movie. But for me, especially watching it nowadays, it's like, okay, it's cool to see it first. But then you see just a bunch of people swimming around and shooting, harpoons at each other underwater. Not the most engaging stuff. And by the way, that Thunderball song, the constant bwah, 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 is so annoying. I'm sorry, but I do not like the Tom Jones song of Thunderball whatsoever, especially compared to Goldfinger. I mean, no. It's more just a personal opinion, but definitely not for me. But you know what? Like this movie, of course, all the Sean Connery movies have cheesiness in them. But in this movie, to me at least, this is where it got distracting. Especially when James Bond is in this like spine extending machine, and of course the bad guy just turns it up, and it's like the spine, like the dry humping the desk scene, or like dry humping like the table or the bed. It's just bizarre. It's like, how can you feel any tension in this? It just looks so ridiculous. And then, you have the opening fight sequence, then you have the chase through the parade, and then, Fiona Volpe getting shot in the back, and there's just that like little tiny bit of ketchup. It's like the cheesiness got distracting. It really did. And overall, the movie itself is just kind of forgettable, right? Largo as a villain, he didn't have the charisma and charm, that Goldfinger or Colonel Klebb had. And we actually have our first femme fatale, Fiona Volpe. And I thought that, she actually had a lot more charisma and charm than the main villain of the movie. She should have been the main bad guy. Of course, it's based on a book. I get that. But I really did enjoy her in the movie. Sean Connery, though, I could feel he was starting to kind of phone it in a little bit. And you start to realize that every single movie from here on out, he starts to phone it in more and more. And then we have Domino as our main Bond girl, and she's just kind of there, right? Again, she does not have the kind of charisma and charm that Pussy Galore had. Crazy name, right? And then Tatiana Romanova, or even Honey Rider. Honey Rider, again, kind of like Domino, she's just a hot piece of ass. She's just a bikini model for James Bond to screw. I get that. But she wasn't really prevalent in the story. I mean, I guess she was. But again, she didn't have any of that spunk that Tatiana Romanova or Pussy Galore had, right? She's just kind of there. And overall, the movie's just kind of okay, right? And then we have the climax, the boat chase. Wow. Cheesiness being distracting, that's one of them. But luckily, the next James Bond film was a lot better, at least in my eyes, because You Only Live Twice, I'm going to put it up into really like it. And this is the movie that reminds me the most of Austin Powers. You have like the whole Japanese thing, and you have Blofeld, and then you have Blofeld's big plan. This is his face reveal, and I understand that Blofeld, had different actors going on, but what a great design. What a great design. And, again, there's some things in the movie I didn't like. Sean Connery kind of phones it in, and then we have, James Bond becoming Japanese. Like, not only is that racially insensitive, again, it doesn't really have any, really significance on the plot, right? They kind of shift Bond girls like halfway through the movie, or, closer to the end. They just shift the Bond girl. One's dead, and then the other one, all right, we don't need Aki anymore. Now we have Kissy Suzuki, whatever it is, Kissy, right? Anyways, that's the stuff I don't like. But the Japanese flavor in this movie, it makes the movie, feel distinct. Like we've seen the Bahamas before. We've seen, like Eastern Europe, with Switzerland in Goldfinger, and then you have, Turkey from Russia with Love. We've seen those kind of locations before. Now we have Japan. This movie really stands out in that regard. I also like the plot. It was easy to follow, and you felt the circumstances. You felt the stakes. Just like in Goldfinger, you really felt that, like Goldfinger's plan has some serious consequences. Same with Blofeld's in this movie. You felt the weight of it. And because of that, the action at the end, the climax, is probably one of the best climaxes out of all. You know what? I'm going to say this right now. It is my favorite climax out of all of the Sean Connery James Bond films. It is great. Even for 1967, just those sets. That set is huge. The amount of extras. The action was actually exciting. And because we're invested into the story and the story has stakes, the action just feels so much bigger and grander. And this is a great James Bond movie. It really is. And then we have George Lazenby's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I will be doing a video on that alone. And then Sean Connery came back in 1971 for Diamonds Are Forever. And this one, before even doing this, I'd never actually seen Diamonds Are Forever. So this was a first time watch for me. I did not enjoy it. Like, my best way to describe this movie is it's just full of crap. And I'm not a kind of guy to go into a movie and, look for plot holes and look for nitpicks and say like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's stupid. And then try to find something, actively search for it. But in this movie, there's a lot of arm tossing, right? Right? Arm tossing, right? I'm sure you guys have done it before in movies. I'm just reading my notes down here. What a weird opening. You have Bond is not seen because, of course, Sean Connery's back. But just the filming techniques just look so bizarre. But then he runs into Blofeld, and then but he's the guy from You Only Live Twice. He's the same actor. So that was a bit confusing. And then he dies, or quote unquote dies, in just a giant pool of shit. It was just so weird. We have elephant slots, when the elephant in Las Vegas plays the slot machine and it goes crazy because all the elephants are up there. And the climax, and then we have Blofeld and drag. This movie just was so cheesy and just so weird. And Sean Connery really phoned it in. His charm was almost gone. You know, when he was talking to the woman, you know, Tiffany Case, just there was no suaveness. There was no, like, Bond, James Bond. Like, oh yes, I'm Bond and I am a secret agent. Like, you know, when I think of, like, From Russia with Love, you know, when he meets Tatiana Romanova and he's like, you know, she's like, I think my mouth is too big. And of course not. Right, just right size. For me, that is. Which is a blowjob joke. So good for you, Bond. And, you know, he's all like, there's a kind of swagger in the air. Like, oh, like, you know, hot secret agent and then hot defective, defectee from Russia. And then we have just, you know, Tiffany Case just like putting out her cigarette on an ashtray in James Bond's chest. And he just looks just so disinterested. And it just lacks all, like, it just lacks that spark that you had in Dr. No and From Russia with Love and Goldfinger and even like Thunderball and You Only Live Twice. Like, those movies had a spark. This movie just feels so weird. It doesn't feel like a James Bond movie. And it's the same director as Goldfinger, right? The action at the end, like, it was interesting to see, like, you know, the big fight on the oil rig, and they're real explosions. So why didn't you get real explosions when, you know, like, there was the diamond satellite blowing up those other, like, that looked bizarrely dated, and it was just so laughable. And I mean, you have the two-wheel car stunt, which was nice, but then you see that it's on the right wheels, and then it cuts to them being on their left wheels. That one was distracting. And again, I don't try to find this stuff, but I just noticed it. But the biggest problem is that I was not able to get invested into the story because I was kind of lost, right? There were some weird editing moments where I'm like, wait, what happened, right? I think of the scene when he was in the coffin, right? It was just bizarre. I couldn't even tell you what the actual plot of the movie was. Like, there were some diamonds being smuggled out of South Africa for Blofeld's giant satellite. And did the diamonds make the satellite work? Or was it there just to make it look, you know, all pretty and shiny? It didn't really make any sense to me. And again, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I was just kind of distracted by all this, like, the weird stuff. Mr. Wind and Mr. Kidd were kind of a funny little addition into the movie. I mean, that haircut is so awful that it works, right? And because you would never suspect that those two guys would be James Bond villains. They are probably the only part of the movie that I actually genuinely liked. The rest of it was just kind of a boring wash. Like, ugh, whatever. Okay, diamonds are forever. Just kind of one you throw to the wayside. And what's up with driving the moon buggy through the desert? I don't really get that one. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching my Sean Connery tier list. If I had to rank them from best to worst, well, it's kind of like that right now in the tier list. I would put From Russia with Love just a little bit above You Only Live Twice, and then from there on, you know, you have Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, You Only Live Twice, Dr. No, Thunderball, and Diamonds Are Forever. So stay tuned for my On Her Majesty's Secret Service review coming out real soon, and tell me down in the comment section down below, what is your favorite Sean Connery Bond film? Goldfinger is probably going to be the most answered movie, but then From Russia with Love does have its fans. And some people might even say Thunderball. Who knows? Whatever it is, let me know down in the comment section down below. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos just like it, definitely hit like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Take care.